Linda and Lee Markowitz have been dear friends for over 20 years, and it was my joy and honor to, at one time, to be their pastors and to pastor Lee's mother, Olive. Oh, what a hoot she was. And took her to Israel with me a couple of times, and Israel has never been quite the same. Lee, thank you for being here today. Linda, a divine appointment of the Lord. We want you to take your liberty today. This is a church that loves you, respects you. Many folks are here today because of you. And we look forward to hearing your message, what God has laid upon your heart. Would you join us in welcoming Linda Markowitz?
Tis my honor, tis my honor, tis my honor to be here. I remember Ruth well. She was just a joy, always a joy. I met Ruth at Women's Aglow. I minister there fairly frequently, and she was just always so welcoming and so caring and so kind. So I'm glad that she's with Jesus, but I know you miss her in your heart. Yeah. Well, it's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. How many of you are mothers? If you're a mother, would you stand? Just stand. How many mothers do we have? Oh, my heavens. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm a mom too, and this is our day. It's often said that God gave mothers because he wanted human arms to wrap around his babies. And I know that every mother here has a wonderful story about her children and how precious and dear they are. And my story is no different than that, and I'm going to share with you today my Mother's Day story. My Mother's Day story is probably unlike anyone else's here, but I believe it's going to bless you and minister life to you. I'm the mother of 2 daughters, and I want you to remember as I continue this story, this is a good story. This is a good story. I want you to say that. This is a good story. You'll need to be reminded, this is a good story. I'm the mother of 2 daughters. My oldest daughter, Marcy, lives in Indiana. She is the mother of my 2 grandsons, Robert and Mark. And my younger daughter, Michelle, lives in heaven. And today we're going to talk about Michelle. And we're going to talk about Michelle's story. I think we have a photo of Michelle. There's Michelle. That's Michelle at Christmas, her last Christmas before she passed away. And she has an amazing story in and of herself. I often say that Michelle was in a hurry to come into the earth and in a hurry to leave. She was born in the car. We didn't even make it to the hospital. Michelle was born on a very, very cold December day, 2 days after Christmas, in Indiana. It was freezing cold. I tried my best to convince my husband, let me have this baby on the kitchen floor. I'm happy here on the kitchen floor. You know, when you're in full labor and you know this baby's coming, you don't want to move. You just want this kid to move. But he was terrified and literally carried me to the car, and we made it about 3 miles from home, and Michelle was born in the car. And then we got to the hospital, and they separated us when we got there. She, of course, was taken care of separately than me. And they brought her to me about 3 hours later. And I got to hold her and smell her and all those wonderful things that mommies do, check all the fingers and the toes. And it was just a wonderful moment. I did not know at that time that that would be the last time I'd see her for 4 days because I unknowingly had the Hong Kong flu. And so they isolated me and they isolated her. And for 4 days, Michelle was basically alone. She had her basic care taken care of. She was fed and changed. But she had little human interaction and no contact with me until day 5. And that was a very, very rough start. Born in a car, freezing cold, taken away from mommy, and then separated out to this place where she knew no one and everyone was just doing duty to take care of her. And as time went on, life got a little rougher because her father and I divorced when Michelle was 5. Marcy, the older daughter, was a little more resilient. She did a little better than Michelle did. But Michelle really never, her entire life, recovered from the trauma of that divorce. She was always looking for Daddy. She was forever looking for Daddy. And as time went on and she grew up, things were really, really out of order in her life in so many ways. When we miss those elements in our early developmental years, sometimes they're never, ever corrected without Christ. They're never corrected without Christ. Unfortunately, very late in life, actually not very long before she passed away, Michelle did accept Jesus as her Lord, and I actually have a video of that moment. I was working on staff for Benny Hinn Ministries at the time, and she was saved under Pastor Benny's ministry, and I have that video of that moment. But I tended to forget that moment going forward when she passed away. I want to tell you about that time because it's very significant for all of us. It's a story that will literally impact you beyond anything you've ever been impacted before. Moving forward, Michelle is now 26. The picture that was taken here, she was 25. This was Christmas. She turned 26 2 days later on December 27th. It is now Mother's Day, and on Mother's Day, 1995, was the last time I saw my daughter. 24 years ago today is the last time I saw Michelle. On that day, she and my husband, I think we have a picture of Michelle and me on Mother's Day. I've changed a little, can you tell? This is 1995. This is Michelle and myself on Mother's Day. And we also have a picture of who else was with us that day, because Michelle was with her boyfriend, Ray. Do we have a picture of Ray? There's Ray and Michelle. I think there's another picture of Ray and Michelle as well. And the four of us celebrated Mother's Day together. Lee and I had gone to church, my husband and I had gone to church in the morning, and we met the two of them for Mother's Day at a restaurant that is no longer there now. Should still be, because it was a great restaurant. The 94th Squadron, I think it was called, over at Executive Airport. And we had a wonderful day. It was a sweet day. There was nothing wrong with that entire day. Everything was perfect. Everything was perfect. That was May 1995. Just about a month later, on Father's Day, June, I was invited to minister at a church in Port St. Lucie. I have very dear friends, been friends forever. I actually knew them in New York before either one of us ever moved to Florida. They had a church, Agape Fellowship Church in Port St. Lucie, and they invited me to come and visit and minister on Father's Day. Well, I was going to leave on Saturday morning. Friday night, before leaving on Saturday morning, I had a dream. And in the dream, you know how dreams are, they don't always make a lot of sense and they have a lot of unrealistic elements. But in the dream, I had sent both of my daughters, Michelle and Marcy, a plane ticket to come and visit me. And in the dream, I could see them in two separate locations trying to pack to come to visit. They each had a suitcase on a bed, and they were each trying to load the suitcase. And as they would try to put things in the suitcase, the things would just jump back out on the bed. That happened for both girls in both locations. And I watched, it was so odd in the dream, I thought that's so strange. But they both wrestled with those items to get them in the suitcase. Michelle was actually really clever because she'd put one thing in and shut the lid, you know, put one thing in and shut the lid. And then the dream changed. And in the dream, I was standing on the tarmac of an airport as I was watching a large jumbo jetliner come to park. It parked, attendants came and put a stairwell up to the front door, and people began to deplane. And I looked at them and I thought, that is really strange, because every single person that came off of that plane had their airline ticket in their right hand and a package or a bag in their left hand, every single one. And my daughters came down off of the stairwell, and they were exactly the same. They had an airline ticket in the right hand and carrying their suitcase in the left hand. And my younger daughter, Michelle, sort of became a little quicker stepped than her older sister, and she reached me first. And she handed her ticket to me. And I reached out to take the ticket. I thought, I don't need the ticket, but I'll take the ticket. And before I reached to get it, a large hand came around from behind me and took the ticket. And I turned around and looked, and I could see absolutely nothing but bright, blinding light. And that was the end of the dream. Well, I knew it was a spiritual dream. I woke up in the morning, I prayed, I asked the Lord for interpretation, but I didn't receive anything. Packed up, went on down to Port St. Lucie, was going to spend the night with my friends. minister the next day at their church, and actually was going to stay until Tuesday morning. But they were friends, and we were going to spend some time together. And Sunday morning was normal, wonderful. It was Father's Day. They had 2 small children at the time, and they made a big deal for Daddy. You know, all the things that are made with spit and macaroni and those kind of things that you just learn to cherish after a while. They had those things all prepared for Daddy, and we had Daddy breakfast and went to church. And it was a good day. It was really a good day. And I am not a napper. Even to this day, I don't take naps as a general rule. But that day after lunch, we had this wonderful lasagna dinner that Mary, the mother, had prepared specifically for me because I really enjoyed that. I was just tired, and I went in to lay down, and I slept not even 40 minutes. And in that period of time, I had that exact same dream again. Every detail exactly the same. To this day, I have never had a duplicate dream. From that day to this, I've never had a duplicate dream. But I had the same dream 2 times. So I got up and I talked with my friends about it. Remember, they're pastors. And we prayed about it. And I mean, nothing, no bells went off, no alarms. I mean, nothing. As a matter of fact, the pastor said, Linda, the Lord's obviously talking to you about your children. And it's certainly not a bad thing. It's a good thing because obviously that hand extended was Jesus. I go, yeah, you're right. That's good. So next day is Monday. Monday, we were going to do some shopping, have lunch together. We had gone down to Fort Lauderdale and just having a great day. And about 5 or 6 months or 7 months earlier, my husband Lee and I had been to hear a live Brooklyn Tabernacle concert and recording. And they had told us that cassette would be available in about 6 months, and I was continually looking for it. I was looking for it. And one of the places my friends and I shopped that day was a Christian bookstore. Actually, it was the last place we shopped before heading back to Port St. Lucie. I've already made my purchases. I'm heading out the door, and there is a display right by the door that I had missed that had this new recording from the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir. And I go, oh, I've been looking everywhere for this. Please wait, I want to buy this cassette. So I went back, purchased the cassette. We went on back to Port St. Lucie, had a wonderful early evening, and about 7 o'clock, the phone rang. And they answered the phone, and they came to me. I was in the bedroom with their oldest daughter. They came to me, the pastor and his wife, and they said to me, we need to talk with you, and Jennifer, you need to leave. So Jennifer left the room, and they shut the door, and they handed me the telephone, and it was my husband, Lee. And Lee said, what I have to say to you is the hardest thing I will ever have to tell you in my life. Well, his mother had been ill. She had been actually staying with us because she had been so ill. And my first thought was something happened to Mom. Something had happened to Mom, Mama Olive, that Pastor made reference to a few moments ago. That was my first thought. But that is not what came out of Lee's mouth. Lee said, Michelle is dead. He said, Ray shot her to death. This Ray. This happy, smiling Ray shot her to death. Even now, I tremble remembering that moment. My thoughts were so random and so crazy and so nothing, and where was this powerful woman of God at that moment? I was just trying to find anything that made sense. Got off the phone with Lee and stayed with my friends for a while, several hours actually, because number one, the pastor didn't want me to drive by myself to go back home, and number two, I wasn't prepared to drive home by myself. But as time went on and I knew I needed to go, I told them, I can do this, I can do this. I can do this, I can do this. So I got in the car and headed home, and I popped that cassette in the player in the car. And it began to play on one song. It just, not even the first song. It played one song. And it played that song again and again and again. It never played any other song on the cassette. That one song repeated itself. That one song by the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir is called It's Not in Vain. And what the words said were, it is not in vain what you do for Jesus Christ. Nothing you do for him, nothing you do for him is lost. And on the way home, I became very, very, very aware that Jesus was sitting in the passenger seat. He was right there. He was right there. And he said to me, almost halfway home, he said, Linda, I have her. I have her. And you would think that would comfort you a lot, and it did some. I'm not saying that it didn't comfort me, but I was still rolling in this grief and this agony and crying so hard I couldn't even see the road. And I get home, and Lee is there, his mother is there. We can't even really communicate to each other. I get home around 11. We just barely can even say anything. Lee held me, I cried. We all went to bed about midnight. We live in a very small duplex, and Mama was sleeping on the sofa bed in the living room. And I went to bed and couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. Every question imaginable was running through my mind. How? Why? How? Why? And over and over again, that torment just kept running all over me, and I was getting really, really angry. I just got up out of bed about 5 and went into the kitchen and sat at the table. Since Mama was asleep on the sofa bed, I couldn't turn the light on without disturbing her, so I just sat down at the table and just began to cry out to God and say, you have got to tell me what's going on. Make this nightmare go away. This isn't possible. This isn't possible. You have to make this nightmare go away. And I was just drowning in this anger, just drowning in it. It was choking me, and tried to shake myself away from that. I just got up and stood and went over by the sink, and standing there in the pitch dark, everything changed. Everything changed. Because in a moment, God Almighty came and stood face to face to me in my kitchen. I didn't see him, but his presence was undeniable. Undeniable. And he said something to me very sweetly. He said, Linda, don't be angry. Be grateful. I've delivered her from much. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? What are you saying, be grateful? And I was like, I rebuke you, you can't be talking to me, you're not God. And then he didn't say it again, but it just kept echoing. She's been delivered from much, she's been delivered from much, she's been delivered from much. I don't want you to be angry. And the anger was just drowning me. It was drowning me. Revenge was starting to rise up in me. And I just meditated on that for, I don't even know, minutes. And finally I knew I had no option here but to do what he asked. I didn't know how I was going to do that. I didn't know how I was going to get rid of that anger. I didn't know how I was going to make the next step or take the next breath, but I just in my heart said, okay, all right. I refuse to be angry. I give you the anger, and by your grace, I'll choose to be grateful. Instantly, my heart was free. I felt the new life come into me. I took a big sigh of relief. It was just the most joyful moment. And then he spoke again. And he said, Linda, I'm asking you to forgive Ray. And I'm asking you to embrace him as a son. I'm asking you to forgive him. And I'm asking you to embrace him as a son. I don't know how long I stood there. It seemed like an eternity. I was stone cold, frozen in my tracks, standing there by my kitchen sink. Forgive this monster that just took my daughter's life? At that moment, I didn't even know the details. I just know that she had been shot. The details are far too gory to describe. But the Lord said, I'm asking. How do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do that? How do you forgive someone that has hurt you so deeply, taken something so precious away from you that is not ever going to come back? How do you do that? How do you do just that part? And then how do you turn around and take this one as a son? This picture taken on Mother's Day is the second time I'd ever seen Ray. I'd met him at Christmas and Mother's Day, 2 times. I'd only seen him 2 times. And I didn't want him as a son. I didn't want him in my life. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. The Lord didn't say anything else. He just stood there quietly. His presence was overwhelming. That lightness that came in my heart when I agreed to let the anger go was definitely still there, and I began to remember. Well, I said yes once. I said yes once. Grace came immediately. Can I say yes again? Can I say yes, I'll forgive him? Can I say that? I mean, really say that? Can I say that? And can I mean it? And can I embrace him as a son? Not in my flesh. Not in any way natural. But I trusted God. I trusted him. He'd never ask anything of me ever that he didn't fulfill. And so I just opened my mouth, blindly, emotionless, just because of obedience and nothing else. Nothing else. I said, I will. I will. And what I can only describe as liquid grace, complete liquid grace, overtook me. It overwhelmed me. It absolutely surrounded me and filled up every cell and every drop of blood I have. Every part of me was absolutely, completely, totally saturated in grace. And I was able to breathe. I was able to breathe. And I knew, I can't do this, but you're going to help me. And we're going to do this together. I forgive. I'll do what you ask. I sat down when it became daylight and wrote Ray a letter. I wish I still had that letter. I wrote him a letter and told him that I forgave him completely and totally, that I held nothing against him, and that I trusted that he would find the same Jesus that gave me the ability to do that in his own life. Ray turned himself in, and he was ultimately incarcerated at the 33rd Street Jail in Orlando. And he did indeed meet Jesus. He met him in a powerful, wonderful, glorious way. As a part of my victim's rights in Florida, I was granted one visit with him prior to his trial. And I took advantage of that right, and I went to see him. And I was taken to a enclosed glass room or half glass room where the correction officers could see in, sat at a table, and they brought him to me chained like an animal. His ankles were chained together, his hands were chained behind his back. They brought him in, and I could barely stand to see what I was seeing. Scared, sad, pitiful man. And I asked the correction officer to unchain him. And his response to me was, well, ma'am, I can't do that. I said, please unchain him. Please unchain him. I'm not afraid of him, and I'm not going to hurt him. And so the officer did unchain his hands, and he sat at the table across from me. And I really don't remember a whole lot about our conversation that day. I remember I asked him why. I remember he told me over and over again that he didn't mean to kill Michelle, that he was sorry. But I began to just uncontrollably sob, and it was the first time I had cried since the incident. This is months later. And I realized I wasn't crying because of the loss of Michelle. That's not why I was crying. God had healed my heart, genuinely, truly. My heart was healed. I was crying because I clearly knew, God was extracting his promise from me. I said I would embrace him as a son. From the moment I agreed to do that, until that particular moment, I did nothing. I didn't pray a word of prayer for him to my remembrance. I pray in tongues all the time. Maybe I did pray for him in tongues, but in English, did I pray for him? Not a minute. I was waiting for the grace. And that moment, God dropped a love in my heart for this man. And I was crying because I knew what he said was real. I knew what he said was what he expected. I want you to forgive him, and I want you to embrace him as a son. Ray ultimately was sentenced. It's a part of the story. I'm not going to share it here, but I did have a say in his sentencing. And that was an important step for me, another part of the victims' rights laws that are on the books in Florida. And he was incarcerated and sent away. And I didn't see him at all. This relationship, just by mail at first, and ultimately by phone calls, because God said, embrace him. Just because God said. Are you willing to do anything just because God said? Are you? That's a question you need to ask yourself. Are you willing? Just because God said. Are you willing? Well, it was awkward for both of us in the beginning. Obviously, it wasn't quite the coolest thing. And I never told him what the Lord told me. I never told him. We developed this relationship. I ultimately met his mother just one time. Just one time I met her. Wonderful, wonderful woman. I developed a relationship with her long distance as well because Ray's crime affected my family, but it affected his family as well. Everyone lost here. This was huge. Everyone lost. There was no victor in this. And I developed this wonderful relationship with her. She had such a wit and such a delightful sense of humor. And she became very, very ill, and it was obvious that she was going to die. And because Ray couldn't go, my husband and I went to Massachusetts to be with her. And to just again speak the love of Christ over her, again, speak the joy and the peace of the Lord over her. And just to be there because he couldn't. He couldn't. My family, including my husband, could not accept the path that I had taken. I'm very aware no one got that download of grace. No one had that same encounter but me. My husband didn't agree at all. My family, my brother, my sister, their spouses didn't agree at all. And to this day, some don't. Ultimately, Lee just watched my walk. Basically, he just watched my walk and he realized this isn't going away. This is real. She's really doing this. And so ultimately, many years later, 12 years later, actually, Lee stepped into the same part of the river that I'm in and ultimately was able to forgive as well. And the relationship continued and continued. I never, as I said, I never told Ray that the Lord had extracted a promise from me, but Ray began to send me Mother's Day cards. I have them all. This one is from 2016. I'll read one to you. The outside of the card is, warm wishes are the flowers that grow from thoughts of those we care about. And on the inside, I wish you love and a bright and beautiful Mother's Day, is what's written in the card. This is what Ray wrote. Dear Linda, I hope your special day is wonderful. God blesses us with moms like you. Any woman can have a baby, but it takes a very special, godly, blessed lady to be a mother, and that's what God made you. You all are so much more to me. You're my spiritual mom, and God knows I need you in my life. I'm thankful that I am allowed to wish you a happy Mother's Day. I love you. Blessings, Ray. And another, and another, and another. This one is from 2017. For my great friend who is also my mother. Can't believe it's Mother's Day again. Didn't I just send you a card? This card can't say anything about what you really mean to me. You're my friend. You're my spiritual mom. God knew I needed a big blessing in my life, and he blessed me with you. Have an awesome Mother's Day. Happy, happy, happy Mother's Day. Love and blessings, Ray. So as God was doing a work in my heart, he was doing a work in Ray's heart as well. Forgiveness became very real on both ends of this dynamic. Do you know that forgiveness is the message of the cross? Forgiveness is the message of the cross. And the one thing that we can do to make us the most like Christ is to forgive. And yet many, both outside in the world and in the church, hold on to some of the most petty, inane, little tiny things. Some families fight and feud forever, and if you ask them why, they don't even remember what started it. Separated from one another. You know, statistics tell us that most divorces happen because of infidelity or financial stress. Those are the number 2 reasons for divorce. But do you know that's not true? The number 1 reason for divorce is the lack of forgiveness. That's the reason. And that's the reason relationships are separated. That's the reason that businesses fall apart. It's because one refuses to repent and reconcile and the other refuses to forgive and reconcile. And disaster after disaster after disaster, heartache after heartache can be avoided if we just do what Christ said. He said, taught us to pray, forgive us our debts as we forgive others. Forgive us as we forgive. Forgive us as we forgive. But yet, we hold on to all of this stuff that means absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing. I doubt if there's anyone in this room that needs to forgive anyone for a crime as great as this. What are you holding on to? Our souls are so petty to hold on to animosity and strife and division. It is so petty to not let God be God. He is bigger. And I know personally, when you just agree to do what he asks, he gives you the grace to do that. I could have never forgiven Ray. I could have never even mentioned his name again without grace. And God gave me that grace, that living grace, that living grace. To fast forward, it is now March of this year, 2019, and Ray is released from prison. He served over 23 years for his crime. He was released with a full end of sentence pardon. And Lee and I picked him up at prison. We were the first people he saw the day he was set free. We went to pick him up, got him in the car. The first place that he wanted to go was to Michelle's grave. Talking about an emotional day. So we went straight to the grave. Michelle is buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in Ocoee. We went there, and it was the most beautiful and humbling and precious and painful and agonizing thing to watch him kneel at her tombstone. But he needed that moment. God had forgiven him. I had forgiven him. He needed that moment to absolutely seal in forever that Michelle forgives him too. Ray's a forgiven man. Ray is absolutely a living, breathing example of redemption. He is absolutely what we are in Christ. You killed the Father's Son, and he forgave you. You sent him to the cross, and the Father forgave you. Can you not turn and forgive those who offend you? Can you not do that? Why would you hold on to things that destroy you? I heard another minister one time say that refusing to forgive is like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. Because the only one that is destroyed when you don't forgive is you. That's the one that's destroyed. That's the one that's destroyed. So many times the people that hurt us don't even know that they hurt us. Or sometimes they know when they don't care. And sometimes the people may never come to you and ask your forgiveness or say that they're sorry, but that doesn't exempt you, and it doesn't exempt me from doing what Christ has asked us to do. He's asked us to live lives of forgiveness, constantly letting go, not holding on to petty little things, not holding on to the big things. This is a big thing. Would you agree? This is a big thing. This is not, I didn't have to forgive him because he stole my lunch money. This is huge. But God is more than sufficient. He is more than sufficient. And I want you to hear that message, and I want you to believe that message, because some of you are holding on to things. You're not letting forgiveness flow like a river through you, and it's destroying you. There are people that have serious physical ailments that can be completely, totally healed by forgiving. Totally healed. Completely healed. Is that you? Are you sick here? Are you infirm here because you're holding on and refuse to let go? Let go. Let go. Because redemption is bigger than you can ever imagine. And grace runs like a river. So Ray got out of prison. He had already living arrangements made for him in the New Smyrna Beach area. So Lee and I took him there that day after a trip to Four Rivers. and got him a cell phone that night so he could sort of start connecting with society. And we have maintained our relationship and will continue to maintain our relationship. And I have the honor right now of introducing you to Ray because he's here today. Ray, will you come? love you.
I love you. I don't know what to say. All I can say is thank you for letting me come here and talk to all of you.
Is this one on? I think, okay.
This one might work even better. This one might work. Listen, sorry, folks. Really thank you for inviting me here. The power of forgiveness is beyond the ability for us to understand. And I'll be a perfect example of it. I was so lost. The guy you seen up there, he was so full of sin. He did everything wrong. The wrong decisions, the wrong choices. And thought he was doing the right thing. I thought I fooled myself. I fooled Michelle. Michelle fooled me. We were both doing the wrong things. I sat in that county jail. I said, my life is over, Lord, just take me and let me be over. I was willing to accept the fate of my actions and the punishment that could rightly be mine. Take my life. I took a life, take mine. God said, no, I don't want your life yet. I have plans for you. He said, come to me as you are. I said, but I'm not good. I'm not good at all. I'm broken. He said, I will fix you. I will change the way you think. Then you can change the way you live your life. Linda is the second greatest blessing in my life next to Jesus. Jesus speaks to me through her. She is my mom, in every aspect of the word, except she didn't give birth to me. She gave spiritual birth to me. I can't thank her enough. I can't love her enough. Her forgiveness is what saved me. Otherwise, I think I would have died in prison. God said, I have a plan for you. Spread the power of forgiveness. Don't hold no grudges against anyone for anything, no matter how horrible the act might have been. Because it only hurts you. Like Linda said, it's like you taking poison and expecting the other person to die. By the power of Jesus, I'm a new creature.
Absolutely.
And every day is a blessing that I hope I can give to someone else. If I only help one person in my life, then I know I did what Jesus wanted me to do. I thank all of you for letting me come up here and talk to you. I love you all. And all you moms, happy Mother's Day. Because you are a blessing straight from God. God loves us unconditionally, just like a mom. And I love my mom. God knew I needed two. He gave me two.
I love you. Ray made a very important point, and I hope you didn't miss it. This is not a murderer. That man died. That man died. And a new creature, a new creation in Christ came through the blood of Christ. And as he goes through life, the Lord has a wonderful future plan for him. And he will be used over and over and over again to tell how powerful it is to be forgiven. Lee, was the sound booth able to get that painting? They were? Can we take a look at this painting? We'll come back to this. There's Ray.
That's me.
There's Ray. Are you familiar with that painting? It's actually titled Forgiven. This is Forgiven. Jesus took him when he was broken. He takes you the same way. God doesn't clean his fish before he gets them in the boat. Let's look at Michelle's tombstone. This is Michelle's grave marker. I don't know whether you can see it at the very bottom. It says, God's grace is sufficient. And the word is underlined. Can you see that? Michelle, born in December, cold December morning in the car, died on Father's Day, 1995. But forever with the Lord in heaven. I'm convinced of that. The Lord gave Ray a dream, actually. You want to share the dream that he gave you about Michelle?
Oh, my dream?
Yeah, your dream.
Oh, it was really weird. I walked up, I seen Michelle was standing behind a counter. And I was so thrilled to see her, and I ran up to the counter and tried to hug her. And she said, no, she said, you can't see me right now. I said, no, get your boss, let me talk to him so we can spend some time together. She said, it's not time yet. It's not time for you, Ray. But when the time comes, we'll be together for all eternity. But I love you and I forgive you. And that dream stayed in my head for 24 years. So vivid, like I was watching it on TV. Unfortunately, it wasn't TV, I was sleeping. But Michelle was more real to me then than she ever was in my life. But she was beautiful and whole.
And she's waiting for us.
Amen to that.
She's waiting for us. There's a little tiny book. It's called Within the Gates, if you've ever had a death or experienced a death in the family. It's written by a woman by the name of Rebecca Springer. And I'd had the book, I'd read the book, and I'd forgotten about it actually, but there's a little portion in there where a very similar story to our story takes place. And this woman had died and gone to heaven, and she was watching things happening in heaven. And one of the things that she saw, she was being escorted by an angel, and she saw people running, and she asked the angel, what's going on? What are they doing? Where are they going? And she said, oh, another is coming, another is coming. And so she said, well, can I see? And so the angel escorted her to this place where Jesus was standing with about 40 people. And right beside Jesus was a woman, a young woman. And in the book, it says that the young woman had been murdered on earth. And her murderer, the one responsible, was now coming home. And she and Jesus would be the first ones to greet him. And I have held that picture in my heart. When Ray steps over into glory, the first ones there will be Jesus and Michelle. Amen. 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 I love you too.
Love you.
I love you too. I pray this story stays with you, that it's not just something that you come to hear on Mother's Day. I told you it was a good story. It is a good story. It's an amazing story of redemption. It is an amazing story of grace. And it's a story that will play out over and over and over again in your lives if you'll just remember this message. Nothing is worth holding on to. Not one offense, not one betrayal, not one lie, not one theft is worth holding on to. Let it go. God will give you the grace to do what you need to do on the other side of the choice. I am a living example of that. Ray is living redemption. And we bless you today. Thank you for this honor and this privilege.